Restore the Republic. I want to welcome you. This is Sheriff, Soil Jurisdiction Sheriff Andrew Ank on the unincorporated county of Richland, Ohio. And with me today, unincorporated county sheriff from Summit County, Ohio, Sheriff Adam Bonner. How you doing, Adam?
Pretty good. How about you?
Doing good. It's a nice day out, sitting back, enjoying some of the weather, but had to get this in, getting some concerns that a lot of these elected officials from the so-called other jurisdiction just aren't understanding what's going on, And the law enforcement community itself just isn't understanding their role inside of our unincorporated American government. They're just not getting it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but their training is limited. We have to give them a little bit of leniency there. I don't expect or anticipate any of them to comprehend what we're talking about for quite some time, but there are some situations, where that are going to need to be escalated, to maybe like a 30, 60, 90 with the amnesty, 30 day, 60 day, 90 day. As these things are rolling out, because some of those types of cities that might be within our counties, they're more on the side of acting militant towards its people. Yeah. And we need to get back to them upholding, their contracts to the people, which means constitutionality. If you're doing things that are unconstitutional, doing emolument violations, all those types of things, there's no excuse for it, and we're not going to tolerate it. But at the same time, we get that they're taking their pecking order from the top down, whereas we're addressing this from the land and soil. I don't care about the top down. We don't do that stuff here. So,
yeah, I get the feeling that at their top in their jurisdiction, they're just not. There's something about they just want to be destructive or something. They're just out of control. And they're not sending it down. They're not doing any real training on how to treat Americans, because we're back. That's one thing that we've talked about. We're going to have to school them on, the new set of training on how they're going to have to deal with us.
Right.
We are their employers,
Yeah, not just us, but our ground men and women who are out there for the newsroom on the PSO side, they're innocent bystanders, but they are press, and they do have a right to be out there in the communities interviewing or doing what they're doing. A lot of their activities are constitutionally protected, so if they're out there and they happen to see a SWAT type, raid or whatever occurring in a neighborhood and they happen to catch it, they're not out there doing anything, unlawful or illegal or going to hinder what they're doing, but they do have a right to report on it. And I can tell you this, some of the footage I've seen over the past couple weeks, I'm seeing like full-on military style raids and stuff like that going on over in Akron. It's wild. I mean, it seems to me like, certain people in the community should be safeguarded from being in crossfire and stuff like that. It shouldn't be going on in neighborhoods where kids and stuff like that are playing, or elderly people have to worry about stray bullets flying, because it seems to me like that would be more provoking, to create that type of a situation rather than de-escalating and perhaps grabbing somebody while they're out in the community, maybe shopping or something, or just away from the neighborhood. Yeah. I see this stuff go on all the time, though, and I just sit back and I think, well, militarily speaking, I wouldn't be going into neighborhoods like that, full SWAT. That's dangerous. That can go a lot of different ways that are very bad, and we don't want that.
Yeah, so today, like I said, we want to talk about their role, what their role is in this. And, start off with, we got to separate who's who. And, there's two kinds of cops, really. We're not really cops, but this is for the viewers just to understand. Two kinds of cops. There's public peacekeepers, and then there's private law enforcement. private security personnel hired by corporations. That's the law enforcement. You know, they're there to protect their business interests, not the people, the business interests of the corporation. We call the first ones the elected public officers. We call us peacekeepers. This purpose is to keep the peace, protect the people and their property and our communities. You know, that is our role, our duty is to protect people and their property. And the most common public peacekeeping officer of this country is the sheriff. You know, that's us. We were elected by the people, not by U.S. citizens, but by actual Americans that are status corrected, and they
Qualified electors.
yeah, qualified electors. So unfortunately, our government was kind of converted. You want to speak a little bit on that?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, as many county governments were quietly converted into commercial corporation franchises, maybe in the 1960s. I think, it even goes back as early as the 1920s, but, the public offices of our honorable county sheriffs were unlawfully converted into private corporate offices instead. So, we used to have unincorporated soil jurisdiction constables, and we haven't had, soil jurisdiction constables or sheriffs in, about 160 years. I mean, it seems to me like as you look back in history, you'll find that the ones that were in office stayed in office until it ran its course. But, once that incorporation and stuff like that was already set into place, they were kind of just pushed aside, and then the commercial actors then came into place. So, that's unlawful conversion. That's taking things and putting it into statutory civil, fiction land, and getting rid of, our constitutionally protected and guaranteed rights that they are contracted to uphold and support. But, we've gotten away from that to where there's like this enforcement hierarchy that has this intent on enforcing statutes, codes, rules, regulations instead of, our best interests. The public's interest, these are the people within the public of these cities and counties just completely being deprived of their rights and, their God-given inherent rights and, their liberties. And, it's just kind of eventually everything's turned foreign, and it's things that are not supposed to be being enforced or applied to the people, but rather those things were created for federal employees, and for U.S. citizens who don't know who they are yet. So, the sheriffs themselves went from being considered lawmen, to being human resources, and none of this was explained to any of them. As that commercial statutory stuff was being pushed, they were never told. Some of them might have, like, right at the shift when things were changing, they might have grew up in an era where things were totally different. And they were not being told that, like, when they grew up and they got into the field, that everything was converted over and that we weren't doing things that way anymore. And so, lawful, unlawful, or legal, illegal, right?
Yeah.
So when we start looking at those types of words and breaking them down, and we look at their Black's Law terminology, and then we look at our Bouvier's, and we start seeing, and then, we can go back and look at various other dictionaries, we can start to kind of break this stuff down. But the problem is people don't read. They don't even know where to start reading. They don't know about Chicago Styles manuals. They don't know that there's a thing called legalese that attorneys, magistrates, ALJs speak. They don't know. They just go into these places and think that, it's in the eyes of justice because, they act very well. They're wearing these costumes and things. And
They should. The people should know the legalese, because if you ever stepped in a courtroom and it just sounds like you're on another planet, the way they're talking.
It really
That's what
does.
it is, you know?
Oh yeah, I've had my fair share. I like to just go sit and watch sometimes. I used to do that early on, and some of the stuff I would hear, I'd just be staring at him like, "Are you serious right now?" I mean, this guy on the screen, obviously, he's not here, so I'm questioning how the heck do they claim that they have personal jurisdiction when this guy hasn't crossed the bar? So I mean, probably some internal policy that's not even lawful, anyways, but that's what they all do. They all write their own internal policy and, they push it as if it's law. Kind of like, have you ever gone into one of these places and seen a sign that says you can't record or you need to request permission?
Yeah.
I hate to tell you, but no, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not going to request anything. I'm doing it because that's my right. And if your feelings or ego gets hurt because of it, that's a you problem. That's not my problem.
Exactly. I
You
know.
know, that's a protected right.
Yeah, you brought up Black's Law, and I know a lot of people that I've talked to in the past. They'll bring up Black's Law dictionary too, and I'm just like, okay, you got to think about this. That is a legal dictionary. It'll give you the legal definitions of things. But if you want the lawful definition of words, you got to go to Bouvier's. They're two different sets. Usually the words, their definitions have a little difference, because law and legal are totally different. And we gotta get the people understanding this stuff, gotta get them out. Like you said, people start to need to start reading more instead of just watching YouTube videos and keep passing on the same old crap,
Well, if people would actually read, and this is something that we have, it's just an existential funk that's going on across the world because this indoctrination, the way people are educated, education should be starting in the home, with your parents, your families, and you shouldn't take everything that you hear in public education and even private education. You shouldn't take that as the gospel because you're being breadcrumbed what they want you to learn. And it's just going to keep you indoctrinated into eventually being, a good worker who stays quiet, pays your taxes, lets them violate and trample your rights. And that's what they want. That was the whole Carnegie Rockefeller thing. That's why they got into the boards of education and eventually started altering the curriculum. And I know at the turn of the 19th century, they used to teach people their rights, so they knew their rights and they can stand in their square and defend their rights and stuff like that. No law versus, de facto legal stuff. And, we had prayer in school still. It wasn't a big issue. And we didn't have people coming here from other countries having issues with our flags, Now people can identify as a cat, and they put a litter box at the end of the hallway in the schools, and that's completely immoral,
Yeah, it's out of control.
Anyways, we could talk about that stuff all day long. I'm sure we could probably sit here and just ramble on, but let's get
Yeah,
back.
well, back to what you were saying. You were saying back in the earliest of 20s, but mainly in the 60s. That's when the incorporation was started into these counties, and it kind of led to a big court decision. I guess it was called Mack and Prince versus USA Incorporated. You go over that?
Yeah, but like say for instance, before we get into Mack and Prince, we didn't have family courts and stuff like that. Back in the 60s per se. I mean, the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act, is why things started getting bastardized and went away from Article 3 and, no constitutional rights and Bill of Rights and all that, even though there's a bunch of pretty things that they post places and they say you have it. But any place that I've seen over the past 25 years, they trample all over that stuff. They don't even want to hear about it because they're administrators. So, 1960s, but as you get into the late 60s, early 70s, that's when family law courts, which they're completely Nisi Prius, just like traffic courts, You know, they operate off Nisi Prius rules and, you know, legal fiction laws and stuff like that. So living men and women are not supposed to be trafficked in them places. But, you know, what we need to wake people up to is that if they notice their mail coming through their mailbox, if they start recognizing, you know, like their bills and stuff like that. I mean, if you do business with a credit card place, that's between you and the credit card place. That's private banking. You're going to get something that has an all caps name that comes through there. Now, it looks like your name. It's spelled right. It's just not proper English. It's not proper grammatically because it's all caps. So that's how you know that they're talking to a trust or, you know, corporate entity, legal fiction.
Yeah.
And, the sooner people realize that that's what's going on, when they get a summons from one of these administrative tribunals, it's going to be in some form of their all caps name. And that's not them, the living man or woman. That is a legal fiction that, you know, that's attached to a trust. And so, you know, there's probably some type of bonding and securities type stuff going on in the background there that they're not going to tell you about. And then that brings us into this stuff that we're talking about, the incorporations of cities and counties across the country, across the world. And we end up getting into cases like, you know, Mac v. Prince. So as far as that goes, I mean, do you want me to, you know, kind of break it down a little bit? Because basically what it means is, in other words, Mac and Prince versus United States Inc. In other words, what this says is that district courts, doesn't matter whether municipal district, magistrate courts, territorial district, state of state, franchise courts, they're supposed to receive security and enforcement from constables. So, you know, a constable, you ask, is this a commercial sheriff? Non-commercial sheriff? Is it a reeve? Is it one of us? No, that's not our people.
Yeah, it sounds foreign to me.
It sounds that way, but that's not us. You know, we're not the commercial guys. You know, we enforce the public law. We protect our people and their property. And, you know, whenever there's trespass against their rights, then, you know, we can deal with that civilly through our courts. Or, you know, we can actually eventually work with these de facto courts, and we can just tell them, hey, you know, that man or woman's in my jurisdiction. You can serve me. You know, I'm the proper authority of the jurisdiction that they are in, and I'll take that paperwork and I'll do what's necessary with it. So a lot of times what that's going to do for me is it's going to say, okay, I'm getting recognition. They're respecting the jurisdictional boundary here. Now I get to take that and say, well, they're not in your jurisdiction, and I get to return it to them and say, you know, if it's a capital type of offense or crime, you know, I'll deal with it.
Yeah.
But if it's some other victimless crime or some other statute, code, regulation, you know, ordinance type nonsense that they're
I think that's what the people really need to get is,
yeah.
You know, when a declared American gets in trouble, if he commits a crime, he has to, or you know what, maybe it's not American, just a man or woman. You do not go into these administrative courts where the only thing that they do in there is corporation work. You know, that's why the all capital name is in there. It's all corporations, you know. The men and women do not belong in there. And that's why Ohio has set up the first common law court in the United States as of today, which is a great thing, you know, but now we're here down on the county level, and we're trying to bring up our county courts, you know, for the men and women.
Right.
Yeah, so we got that going on, and we just need people to get on board, you know, start getting on board.
Right. So basically, you know, our sheriff's office were unlawfully converted into foreign constable offices, you know, and these de facto governments or governmental workers that be, they've incorporated themselves, right? And I don't think the people were ever given full disclosure every step of the way. They didn't know what the APA was, what that meant, let alone, lawyers being forced to take bar exams now. That happened in well, they started pushing it in the 60s, but they started mandating it into the 70s to where if you were going to law school, um, they made you have to take the bar exam to, be a foreign agent and be registered and to take private allegiances to the Crown Inc. But the ones that did not want to do that because they knew what that meant, they just went off into other private stuff. Maybe they deal with private trusts and estates, and some of them went into, becoming accountants and other things like that. But
Yeah.
it was private stuff. They didn't want anything to do with the bar. And, just the fact that we have commercial foreign agents calling themselves sheriffs and deputies and law enforcement, there's a real big problem with that because they're not enforcing law. They're policy enforcement. They're basically private security guards for the corporations, the municipalities.
Exactly.
I'm not going to harp on them too much because they don't know. And for the veterans that got into these positions, you don't even realize it, but the oath that you took when you became a veteran, when you joined whatever branch, and then you came and took this other foreign agent oath, that makes you a traitor. And you don't even realize it. And, I frown on that because, you guys need to do better. You need to read. I mean, when I was in, I read everything I could get my hands on. Every book, every leadership thing, every process procedure, I just didn't miss a beat,
Yeah.
I carried all that stuff with me everywhere I went, just so I could look back at it for reference. But people get laxed. They get really laxed and complacent, and that's 160 years of that. Look at what it's turned into. Here we are.
Yeah. So, hey, for all these corporate pukes calling themselves sheriffs, they're not our sheriffs. They are not our sheriffs. They hold no public office, and by rights, they should be arrested for impersonating an officer.
Right, an officer of the United States, cops too. I could easily go and impeach half a department right now if I wanted to. I can go impeach a whole department if I wanted to.
Yeah.
We deputize our deputies, theirs are appointed. Think about
Exactly.
that.
Well,
That's how you know the difference between commercial and, land law.
yeah. We've talked before, and we've really talked about, everybody is, it seems like the word is getting out, everybody knows something's wrong. Everybody knows the things they're doing. But what I see on Facebook and on YouTube is everybody's regurgitating the same stuff, the same forms, the same case law, the same stuff that when you listen to us, it doesn't go into their court system. It's a foreign court system for corporations. None of the stuff works in those courts. That's why nobody's getting any remedy. But everybody loves putting up the same old forms and same old stuff and sending it out to everybody. But the problem is the root cause is those courts. They're foreign. You have to become an American, get in your state assembly, get in your county assembly, and let's start building our freaking government back up. That's the only remedy you're going to see is once we get this stuff up and going.
Well, it's like we talked about many times before, whether here or through the assemblies, they've just gotten so lax at committing securities fraud or unlawfully converting unsuspecting people into a thing, a legal fiction, and they get away with it. It's a booming business. It's a very well-oiled machine. The profits that that you would see, like with our information, we see that they're making millions and billions of dollars across the country through private securitization of, any form you fill out, any affidavit. That's a security. It becomes a negotiable instrument from your John Hancock, your signature. And, they bond it. They get compounding interest daily on those types of things. And it doesn't matter if they're magistrates or judges or administrative law judges. They're not honorable. They practice law from the bench. It doesn't matter if they're practicing law from the bench under color of law. It doesn't matter if the clerk of the court or the bank, if they are noticed. It doesn't matter if you go in there and stand in your square. They're still going to trespass you. Have you ever noticed when you go in, they got metal detectors? Now, their corporate security can have firearms. They're commercial firearms. But if you go in there with your sidearm, they want you to leave it there with them. No, I'm on official business. I don't have to turn anything over to you. That's for you to follow, not me.
Yeah.
Now, they might not like that. They might want to push panic buttons and stuff because we know they like to do that. But I don't. Do you want me to push my panic button now? You want 300?
Well, it's funny for anybody that's watching or anybody will watch. Yeah, I've had the panic button hit on me a few times. And, for doing absolutely nothing other than making someone uncomfortable, I guess, I'm no threat, it's just crazy.
Yeah, God forbid I push my panic button. They really don't want that.
Yeah.
That's the type of stuff right there that dreams are made of for people trained. They're waiting for that button to be pushed.
Yeah, and another major thing is we're going to have to, any law enforcement watching this or corporate sheriffs, you think you have immunity. You don't.
Not over here, you
do not have immunity.
We're the check and balance to their defunct system.
Yeah.
And that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, you're not going to keep committing crimes. Yeah.
Well, this amnesty thing. I could sit here all day long until I'm blue in the face. We could talk about it. Some of them just simply are not going to receive it well. It's not a comprehension thing. It's just, I know this all too well. A lot of times people get promoted higher, not because they're great at what they do, not because they have an amazing arrest record and they follow the rules, but it's because they're a problem, and they don't like dealing with problems and doing the paperwork, so people keep getting promoted up. It's the same way in the military. They don't want to deal with somebody, promote them to a different platoon, promote them to a different unit, get them out of here. Same thing, it applies to men and women. And so just because people are chiefs of police doesn't mean that they're the most qualified, doesn't mean that they're the best. And that's what people need to realize. If you look at what's going on in D.C. right now, that's a perfect example. There's 4 chiefs of police who don't even know what the hell a chain of command is. What's that? They say that on live TV. Well, what do you mean you don't know what the chain of command is? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not going to crack a whip too much on them because I know that they're just, some people make that their goal to climb that corporate ladder, and they don't care what they have to do. They don't care if they have to retain certain information, for foundational purposes, to build off of that. They go through the motions. They learn the stuff that they need to learn at that full statutory realm, where that is a thief of joy in itself. The American dream doesn't exist when you have legal fiction stuff looming over your heads as unsuspecting Americans and people. Even the foreigners that come over here thinking that, I'm going to live the American dream. Well, yeah, to some extent, they're going to live the American dream better than you or me trying to start a business, because they're going to get probably $250,000 in grants and all types of monies that the people that live here can't even get.
Yeah.
So unless if you come from a silver spoon, forget about it.
Yeah.
Or unless if you have some, just unwavering commitment and passion and desire to thrive, that's very, very far and few in between, people that have that type of drive. Um,
Well,
well, I mean, that's like more of a TED Talk type of a thing.
yeah, we are still trying to get the word out. Everybody that we're back. The American government is back. We're repopulating. We're trying to get it bigger, trying to get it stronger. But some people ask me, where should I start or what should I do? And we come up with these little trifold pamphlets here. You got a lot of information, tell you how to do
Those are
some
pretty
things.
nice looking. I
Yeah,
like that. I
yeah,
like
they're
that.
really nice. And they got some QR codes that you can check out, and where you get these, or you go to claimyourinheritance.info. Claimyourinheritance.info, and you can download these trifolds, get them out. You can print out as many as you need. We need to start really getting them out, spreading the word, because like I said, the American government's back. We got to inform our employees who's back in charge.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to go back off of what you were talking about as far as these corporate actors, immunity. There's a coalition right now fighting qualified immunity to get it on the bill. They're looking for 400,000 signatures for, residents of Ohio. Here's the thing. That's commercial. The Residency Act is commercial. That's what kind of bounds you to property tax.
Yeah.
And numerous other things through the mailbox. But there is a coalition who's actually fighting to stop qualified immunity. I'm here to say it never existed.
Yeah.
Not in 160 years, it never existed. Because I'll tell you why. The American people were not given full disclosure as to what was taking place with the people that were in these offices that they call government. And they did not communicate with the people. They trampled on their rights, on their votes, and they just pushed through whatever they wanted to push through legislatively, and then they call it law.
Yeah.
It's not law. That's for them. That's for federal employees.
Yeah, it's their corporate rules. Yeah.
Right. So, anyhow, those types of things, those are just as fictitious as an all caps name. They don't exist. If you're breaking the law to enforce the legal, you would have to know law first to know that you're breaking it to enforce your legal. We study law. We read it daily. So whenever they try to enforce policies that are internal policies within a city department or a county department, if those things were not ratified by the people, they are not lawful.
Exactly.
And that's it. I don't want to argue about it. I see what stare decisis rulings are out there. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled on it, and that's that. There is no argument. You don't get to make up whatever you want to try and arrest somebody. You don't get to ID people for whatever reason. Just cut that stuff out. It just...
Yeah, we
pretty soon.
talked
Rubber's going to
about a lot of that stuff before about, I'm sure many people watch them YouTube videos where that ID is cracked to them. And they're getting trained this, in their academies or something, because that ID is cracked. They need it, they want it, and they're going to get it.
Not
They're
just
going to bust
that.
your window. They're going to drag you out. They're going to do whatever they can do to get that ID.
They'll ask for your social, and you're not supposed to give your social out to anybody. And these people and these magistrates and ALJs in court, these, non-judicial persons acting as if they have judicial authority, all they're doing is trying to, without disclosure, say that you've entered into an agreement or some type of contract, and they're enforcing the contract. That's not judicial authority.
Hey, that's another thing. We talked about this earlier, and a lot of people do not do it. They don't go and get onto the Department of Justice website. Nobody does that. But if you do, you get to see all this crazy stuff that's what's going on from the top down in their corporation. And Trump's been telling, that, what's his name, Mark Mazzelli? About the ALJs and how they're unconstitutional. And
You're talking about the guy that put out the DOJ memorandum
yeah,
to all ALJs from the Department of Justice.
yes,
Mizell, yeah. I believe that just happened in January or February 18th, I think.
yeah, right on the site. You can just read it, and you know what? You
Yeah,
can
Mizell.
walk up to your courthouse and go, "Hey, what's this all about?" You know?
Yeah, that was Chad Mizell. So he basically said that they've been acting without oversight, unconstitutionally and unlawfully for far too long, and that the Department of Justice is no longer going to offer them defense or protection for violating and depriving people of their constitutionally protected rights.
Yeah.
So that was Chad Mizell, and he's one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I was just sitting here trying to do a memory recall. Yeah, I believe it was February 18th. But yeah, you can find all that stuff. Those are some of my favorite sites to go to because I love going to the FBI's websites. You get to go there and find out that U.S. citizens they view them as domestic terrorists.
Yeah.
You know, where else are you going to find that type of content other than on the alphabet agency's websites?
Well, Sheriff, we've fed the people enough today. Let's head on out of here. Is there any? I know you have social media. You want to go ahead and tell people that?
The Reefstock Shop 44 Rumble. Obviously, you can go to the PKTF link tree and find all types of educational, informative information. Their blog helps really awesome. Great articles. Joe Hayes does amazing work. Louise, and just their whole staff. And I really like to advocate for them when I can. They do amazing things, and I'd love to have them on here. As a matter of fact, those are good
We'll try to
guys.
get them on here sooner or later. But everybody look at the banner, you know, we got pktfnews.org. Check it out, claimyourinheritance.info. And always, to Restore the Republic on YouTube.
Right.
We'll see everybody later.
Have
Thanks
a
a
good
lot.
one.
Thanks a lot, Sheriff.
No problem.